In the Northeast, including the markets. That is Sunday's winter storm dumped more than 10 inches of snow on New York City and more than a foot in surrounding parts of the tri-state area. Joining me now with more in New Jersey is David Margolin. He's senior meteorologist at NYSE parent company Intercontinental Exchange. David, it's good to see that you are hopefully warm and cozy in New Jersey as this storm is underway. How historic was this?
Yeah, good to be with you, Kristen. This is certainly one of for this area, it's the biggest storm we've seen in approximately 5 years. It feels like a lot longer. And for the region in general, when you include back toward Texas and the Southeast, it's probably the biggest storm we've seen in about 10 years.
We feel the impact, that's for sure. How are you seeing this storm affect market conditions, including power outages and the supply chain?
Yeah, so it's a combination of factors here. So across the South, they saw a lot of ice or freezing rain, and that causes a lot of problems with power outages. So the areas where we're seeing the most power outages right now are across places like Texas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Louisiana. There's almost 1 million users right now without power. Of course, with airports and just travel delays in general, we're seeing that sweeping across much of the eastern third of the country from Texas to Southeast all the way up the East Coast. And the other factor, which is something more related to what I do on a day-to-day basis, is with natural gas supply and demand. So with the cold and the snow, certainly we've seen demand spike. This is the highest level we've seen all year for basically this week. But also, and this is something that's not maybe as well understood, we're also seeing an impact in terms of the production, actually what's coming out of the ground and going through the pipelines. When it gets this cold, and this is one of the colder air masses really we've seen this week in a couple decades for this time of year, it actually slows the amount of gas that can come out of the ground. So that's compounding the problem, as you can see in the chart right now, and really sending natural gas prices very high.
How does snow impact markets in a more complex way than other weather events?
Yeah, so it's a combination of factors, a little bit like what we talked about, but especially when you get like ice, the freezing rain and sleet, it can actually have a major impact on not just the natural gas supply and demand like we talked about, but it has a more dramatic or more impactful problems on travel. Right? Because with the ice, with the freezing rain, basically it causes a sheet of ice, right? And so that's historically when you see the worst travel problems. And that's why right now we've seen most of the power outages and the more severe sort of travel impacts across, if you're looking at that map right there, like really from like the Dallas area across Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, into parts of Georgia, especially just north and east of Atlanta.
It's not just the snow, of course, impacting conditions. It's also extreme cold, Dave, and something, of course, our viewers will continue to need to monitor. What does this mean for natural gas and overall production?
Yeah, speaking of that cold, just to put this in perspective, on that map that you just had up there, we're looking at the potential for min temperatures to get below zero. It's about a 50-50. It's about a coin toss in Philadelphia and New York later this week. And if that sounds cold and unusual, it is. The last time Philadelphia and New York at LaGuardia Airport were below zero, you had to go back to the mid-90s. The winter of 93, 94. So this is a very significant event that's hitting, that whole area really from the upper Midwest. Chicago was about -10, -15 a couple days ago, all the way into the Northeast. And when you see temperatures like this, I mentioned earlier about how we're already seeing some freeze-offs and so a reduction in production. We're going to see that increase, especially for the Northeast areas of the country. The Appalachian part of the sort of Northeast from interior, say, Pennsylvania down to West Virginia, some of those areas are going to get down to about -10. So we're likely going to see a peak in production freeze-offs probably later this week, which again is going to put more pressure on natural gas prices.
All right, so you mentioned where we are a few days out from here, Dave. I do want to talk about what is next, of course, in the coming days and the weeks. What can our viewers anticipate?
Yeah, so this pattern we're in, this cold and snowy pattern, it's going to be here, it looks like, for a while. So we've got the sort of ingredients to kind of lock this in. So what do you look for cold and snowy patterns? You look for a lot of what we meteorologists like to call blocking in the atmosphere. And basically, when you have a block across the Arctic regions, it forces the cold air, instead of bottling the cold air up near the poles in northern Canada, it forces it south, right, into the Midwest and eastern parts of the country. That looks like it's going to be locked in for a couple weeks. With that, we continue to expect these pieces of energy to move across the southern parts of the United States or out of the West. And then it comes down to timing, right? If these pieces kind of come together. Right now, it looks like we're going to have another opportunity this weekend, maybe early next week, exactly the chart you have there, for another snowstorm along the East Coast or Northeast parts of the country. So again, timing still needs to be worked out. Those details need to be worked out, but the ingredients are there for another storm probably about a week from now.
All right, Dave Margolin, we'll be checking in with him throughout this winter weather. He's senior meteorologist at the NYSE parent company, Intercontinental Exchange, or ICE for short. Dave, thanks as always.
Thank you, Kristen.